Bonjour, you beautiful people. Welcome to the latest episode of Games Up Podcast. Before we go any further, I am going to apologise for the tiny amount of hiss you're going to get on my side of the recording. Britain is currently experiencing Los Angeles' weather. So all of you people who came back from E3, you brought it with you. Thanks very much. And yeah, I have a fan on in the background, but I might die if I turn it off. So, sorry, that's going to be there. I'll try and eliminate it as best as possible. I have to apologise for his side of the recording because he's Lewis Crawford.
Wow. Wow, okay, I'm just going to leave.
Sorry.
Just leave now, yeah. Hello.
How are you?
Yeah, doing well apart from the blistering heat.
I can't imagine what it must be like in your place. I remember, we had sort of half this heat for E3 2 years ago. Do you remember that? Like, everyone crammed into your front room, and Loz was there as well, so there were, 4 people who could barely fit... Oh, man.
Yeah, it's pretty hot, but it's alright. It's alright.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, you know how this show goes. We're done all of our crazy, weird E3 episodes. Thank you for joining us for those. We're back to our regular scheduling now. So let's get on with the news. The first piece of news is a really, really big one, and it's that Amy Hennig of Uncharted fame, the writer of Uncharted and former major player in the studio at Naughty Dog, has departed EA, and her Star Wars game is on the shelf. According to their sources. It was previously known that Visceral were working on the game after she had moved away from Naughty Dog.
Wait, do you want me to...
Yeah, sorry, no, I got a little bit confused there. You jump in, you know this a little better than I do.
Yeah, so Visceral were working on this game, but we knew that they'd kind of stopped working on it. The EA bosses were complaining about it apparently being too linear, and so EA Vancouver took over the project. And it's I think from what I understand, it's very much a different game under EA Vancouver because it has been opened up into an open world game. Part of me is kind of expecting another Destiny, but now with Star Wars in there. And that's actually Hennig's point of view, that she says that it's very much a different beast now. Which upsets me because I think I would love the combination of Uncharted and Star Wars, if that's what they were going for, something a bit more deeper, because it's a series that really deserves it, you know.
Yeah, I'm a little torn on how to feel about this. I agree with you. I'd like to see Amy Hennig, who's easily one of the best writers in the industry, taking the reins of a series as respected and well known as Star Wars. Also, she had the reins for quite a number of years at this point. It's at least been, I think, 2 years. And I'd love to know why we haven't seen the game. I'd love to know how much sort of infighting there'd been between her camp and the bosses at EA, how much sort of internal struggle that's made. And I think you can kind of tell that EA are a bit scared of losing the Star Wars license at this point, because they've had to sort of really buck their ideas up with Battlefront and change and react quite strongly to feedback on that one. They've lost Amy Hennig. They have apparently shut down a couple of projects already at this point. You can go and look at the Mos Eisley open world, bounty hunter almost game that apparently has been put on the shelf. There doesn't really seem to be much good news out of that license for EA, and you kind of wonder whether they're in emergency mode.
Yeah, definitely, and yeah, you do have to question whether this is the BioWare situation in some sense, where you're this needs to be something that maybe has a bigger scope than it started off with, if that makes sense, or maybe more money in it than it might have started off with. Yeah. So Hennig's now forming her own studio. She expects to really only be quite a small studio of 10 to 15 people or something, and work on VR games, because I think that's where she's interested. I guess. It's the problem is that VR's in such a state where I'm okay, it'd be great if we have a really good creator on there doing VR projects, and at the same time I'm but it's VR and it's not necessarily doing great, and it's where kind of games go to die. But I don't know.
I mean,
maybe it's a good thing.
it's one of those weird cycles, isn't it? Without the right games, VR doesn't take off. Without VR taking off, you don't get the right games. So maybe this is what we need.
Yeah,
Maybe this sees her back on PlayStation at some point in the future, which would be kind of cool. Um, yeah, it's a weird one. I gotta say, man, EA are in dangerous shape. Like, if they don't have a Star Wars game out in the next couple of years, and if Anthem struggles or doesn't sell as well as it needs to, or has problems at the gate, like a lot of the eggs that EA have put in baskets might turn out to be rotten.
yeah, definitely. And you can tell looking around these games, Anthem doesn't look cheap in any way,
Mm,
But obviously, it's like it's designed to make a lot of money, and then at the same time, you end up with like these failed projects, and if they fail, then they fail hard.
yeah, yeah,
You
yeah.
know, you can look at like Gearbox's Battleborn for a good example of a game that was meant to make a lot of money that didn't.
Mm, mm.
Yeah,
In further Star Wars news, the DLC roadmap for Battlefront 2 was released this week, detailing what content is coming out, when it will come out, and when you can expect to see things launching in relation to each other. Is it too late at this point, Lewis? Is this too little, too late?
yeah, I think so. And to be honest, I want to see an end to the trend of like games getting good afterwards. Like
Mm,
it's all well and good for games to be improving, but like we get too much of this where a game is released and everyone complains about it, or maybe the content's not enough, or and then down the line we go, oh, this game's good now. It's got free updates, and you're like, it should have started off good. Um,
Now, I agree with you, but at the same time, we've seen that work so well for stuff like Rainbow Six, For Honor. Like, in a way,
Ubisoft.
Ubisoft have made well, yeah, basically, but like,
No, it's
and I
true.
mean, even like we'll get down to it in a bit, but like Pokemon Go, for
Yeah,
example,
yeah,
like
yeah,
the
true.
Switch to some extent has been that. Like, not in the same way because that didn't launch as flawed, but like this generation has almost been one of people kind of saving themselves post launch.
Yeah, yeah, true. But like, I can see it as a positive thing, but then it's like I want games to release in a good state, I guess.
I
In the
agree with you.
best state, you want as a creator or as a director or whatever, you want to release your content as the best it can be before you look into roadmaps and extra stuff.
Yeah, I agree. I think I don't mind a couple of games getting better after launch, and I do like that games that we think have failed can survive after the fact and add variety to the industry. But I do think it's interesting that games like Overwatch, for example, seem to have the most credit, the most credibility, and the most sales because they launch in a very good state and then improve themselves afterwards. I have no problem with DLC in improving a game. I just don't like it improving past the point of failure, if that makes
Yeah,
sense.
okay.
Yeah. Topic number 3, it's time for my weekly wrap up of news no one cares about. There's a new Overwatch hero. He's an evil genius hamster, and I think I love him. And Pokemon Go has more players now than at its peak in the last 2 years. So, all good things if you care about those things. All right, I'm done. Thank you very much. Number
Eh,
4.
really?
What's that?
The Pokemon Go thing surprises me.
Uh, it doesn't surprise me, but I think that's somebody who's still quite into it and has watched the community grow over the last couple of years. Um, One of the things I really love about the game, and we'll get more into this as we talk about Game of the Years and Games of the Generation and stuff, because it'll be a contender for me. But don't fucking joke about that. One of the things I really love about it is that it has, I think, the most organic kind of community that a video game has, because where a lot of developers and a lot of games will say, "Oh, the best thing about it's the community. Like the best thing about Overwatch, the community. The best thing about Sea of Thieves, the community." And that may well be true for those games, but they're still player icons. They're still avatars for the most part. It's only the super hardcore that sort of go out and become a part of the community. Whereas Pokemon Go, you basically have to. And for a lot of people, that can be a turn off. But actually, as it started as a turn off for me, and now I love it. The kind of experiences I've had as a result of meeting people on the street that we play Pokemon Go with, or getting my friends back into it, has been incredibly positive. And I think it's all comes down to enough people seeing it and go, oh, people are playing it. I might pick it back up. And it's like it will be a kind of rising curve affair. I don't know that it will peak much higher than it is at the minute, but like it's still one of the top grossing apps that it's ever been. It still drags in millions for Niantic and Nintendo. It's not going anywhere anytime soon. And there is something incredibly positive about the organic way it brings people into the community.
I guess I'm just more surprised about the numbers still being good because it's, I guess for the peak I saw it all the time. In parks, I guess it's not like that anymore to the same level. So I guess that kind of surprises me that it's still quite good.
So I've been thinking about this recently, and I think the reason is because there's no viral rush for it anymore. Like, when Pokemon Go first launched, what you had was people who were really excited to catch anything in Pokemon Go. So, like, when a Snorlax came up on... God, we're really getting into the weeds here. When a Snorlax came up on the sightings bit of the app, everyone rushed to it. Except now, 2 and a bit years later, lots of people have that already, so the rushes aren't happening. But I'll send you a photo in a second, and I'll put a link to it in the description of this podcast. They put on an event this weekend in Dortmund City, and it was a big sort of event where they introduced some new mechanics and some new stuff around those mechanics and some shiny Pokemon and all that jazz. And it's really cool. And the event is just wall to wall people. Like there's barely room to breathe in among the people playing Pokemon. It's in our chat, dude. And that, like, we obviously don't see numbers that huge. That's crazy. But like, come a community day, for example, we see hundreds of people playing Pokemon each month. Next month, or this month, I guess now, because it's the 1st of July, I'm probably going to go and do Pokemon Day back home in Milton Keynes, where we're both from. And I'm so excited to see how many other people are playing in a different part of the country. And I kind of think that's where the magic of it lies, is you now have pockets of super engaged communities where they're not rushing and making viral videos, but there's probably more of them than you noticed before because they're in little pockets.
Okay, all right.
What do you think of the photo?
What's that, sorry?
What do you think of the photo?
Yes, crazy.
It is, right? Like,
yeah, so many people.
It really brings a giant smile to my face, that, like, because that's such a positive thing that all those people are there together. All right, that's enough of that. Now I'm done for the week. Number 4, Binding of Isaac, the popular indie game series, is getting a card game. The name of the game is Binding of Isaac 4 Souls, and it launched on Kickstarter 4 days ago at the time of recording. It now stands at £600,000 of its £40,000 goal. Lewis, you're pretty into this.
Yeah. I've played lots and lots of Binding of Isaac over the years. That's a game that's been updated for years and years and years now.
I don't mean to put you on the spot, but we worked out how much Binding of Isaac you'd played over the years. Please tell the ladies and gentlemen how you spent your time.
So, I guess, to be honest with you, worked out's a strong word. A combination of like the original Binding of Isaac, which was actually a Flash game on like Newgrounds a long time ago, and then like a game's GOG version, DRM-free version, and then Steam version. I reckon, though, it's in the like, I don't know, like 5,000, something in that kind of region. Honestly, like there was a time when, and even now, I play it about. I've played it about 2 hours a day for the past week. And that's not unusual. And it's that like all the time, because the truth is that the thing that makes Binding indie game of the week, Binding of Isaac, surprise indie game of the week. The thing that makes it a really good game is it's this roguelike game that has such variation that most of those style of games, they have variation, but not to the level that Binding of Isaac does. Where each run's unique. I still play the game 5,000 hours or whatever in and see like stuff that I've never seen before. All the time. you'll go like, oh, I've never seen that happen, all the time. But anyway, so
No. That's cool. That is very special.
yeah, and so I'm quite interested in this card game, especially if it's kind of trying to get the mood of that. It can be played with two people, so me and Crystal will probably play. It's not. I think it's 2 to 4. It's not overly like demanding in terms of players. And apparently they're also working on like a solitaire version of the game,
All right. Okay.
which is quite good. Yeah, I'm quite interested in getting it, and I might actually. It might be the first Kickstarter I actually put money towards. We'll see about that.
Okay. Well, so it only launched this. In fact, it only launched a couple of days ago at the time of recording. Do you know how long they're running the Kickstarter for? How long you've got
I
to?
think it's the normal Kickstarter, so 30 days.
Okay. So
Um,
we'll check back in come the end of the
yeah,
month.
I see it doing pretty well. Obviously it's already done really well, but like
Mm.
600,000. Like I always like it when you see these Kickstarters where obviously it's nice to also see Kickstarters from small people get the money. When you see like a studio that's coming out of nowhere going like, we just need this much,
Mm.
or make something cool. But it's also really cool when you see something like, it was the same with the Myst games, the point and click adventure games, Myst, where it was like they've come to their community wanting 100,000 and they've come out with like 1.5 million or something. I love to see
Yeah.
it when it's like the community is so big and successful for
Yeah,
something that's
we're a group of people who should never not who should never, but who in terms of market conditions and things you wouldn't expect to be popular enough to sell, get together popular enough to sell.
yeah, no, that's exactly it. It's exactly
Yeah,
it. It's
it's
very
funny because
nicely.
when Kickstarter started, it was the place to go when the market didn't want you. Like it was the place to go when you'd failed investors and so on and so forth, and so you were going straight to the people and saying like, "Please, we need your money instead." But now, because of that success, it's become the place where you go to instead of the market because you know your niche.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's a really good measure. It's a really good place to go, I guess, to measure exactly what your market value is, because it is. I think it's very hard to work it out when you look at like if you're one of these companies. I mean, at least Isaac's on Steam, but for the Myst series, you're like these 10-year-old games that are all like on CD, and there's no way of tracking there's no DRM that lets you track like how many people play them.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, so yeah, it's very nice to see it, and I reckon it'll be in the millions at least. Say at least, as if it's like 40 million. No. But
$2
you know,
billion.
I expect it to be at least a million.
And in our final piece of news this week, which leads nicely onto our topic of the week, Jason Schreier from Kotaku. Jason Schreier is notable because his kind of articles tend to be the most, not reputable, but the ones that are a little bit craziest and also most often true. We'll get into that in a second. Jason Schreier from Kotaku has written an article claiming that Google is planning a gaming platform to match Xbox and PlayStation, expected to have a big focus on streaming games rather than buying them or putting them in disc, I assume. Lewis, it's that time of the year again. Somebody's claimed that Google is making a games console. Do you believe them?
I've been thinking for a while that someone's going to make a move. I think like there is space on the market, um, especially at the moment, or especially in the coming of a new generation.
Mm.
There's always space because you like every year the popularity shifts. Every generation the popularity shifts in some way. Just quickly we talk about how like Microsoft started this generation as being like the unfriendly, capitalisty, harsh. No,
Yeah,
but they
look at
started,
them now.
and now it's like they're like the most consumer friendly, and and so it's likely they're going to go into the generation with a lot of goodwill. Whereas Sony have got kind of not well, they actually do have goodwill, I guess, for games, but not necessarily goodwill for like some other things that's going on, like the crossplay. So I think though that there is place for someone to come in and be like, we're going to be one of the next big things. I've been thinking for a while that I wouldn't be overly surprised if Amazon tried to step in. in some way. I like Google. I don't know. Google have tried and failed many times with different projects.
Mm.
Um, but I see someone jumping in, whether it's Google or Amazon or somebody else.
Um, I'm totally on the other side of the fence. Um, I don't think I don't think anybody's going to come into the generation, and I don't think that for a couple of reasons. The first reason is because the market has space, but the market is also super volatile. Like, this generation has been the weirdest generation we've ever had, because the Xbox 360 generation, they were two fairly identical boxes. They did similar things. Everyone tried motion controls, but it kind of failed. The generation beforehand, and you had two pieces of Nintendo hardware who did the same thing but different things, who appealed, didn't appeal. It was all kinds of weird. The generation before that was PlayStation's. It was entirely owned by PlayStation. Xbox introduced something. It kind of went okay. The generation before that was PlayStation's. It killed Sega. Whereas this generation, Xbox failed to PlayStation and are now starting to build themselves back up again. Nintendo came back from the dead. PlayStation sold far more than anyone thought they would, but still haven't topped the PS2. We're moving more towards streaming. We're also moving to more towards a system where exclusives and first party matters far less, especially as it turns out with like cross-platform stuff, especially with cross-network stuff, and especially with third-party games like Crash is a perfect example of. Crash has a lot of respect on PlayStation, and it would have been just fine as a PlayStation exclusive, but it's doing even better as a result of the fact that it was taken away from a first party and given to everyone. For any console to come in right now, they've got to come in on brand new grounds. Like, the industry doesn't look like it used to, where you have a piece of hardware and a bunch of studios supporting it. But nobody's defined what that industry looks like. Like, Xbox now has studios, so that's what their system is going to be going forward. PlayStation has always had studios, Nintendo has always had studios. In a way, they're looking to move the industry back to how it was, where you had a first party system with first party games and third party super connected game, like super connected all the platform games. If Google come in, like, Google don't have studios. So where are they going to get their exclusives from? Or do they rely on exclusives? Or do they try and change the industry in that way? If Amazon come in, okay, they do have studios, but they're all mobile studios. And this is the other thing that gets me. I don't think it'll be Google because Android.
Yeah,
Um, Android makes so much money. Like, it's unbelievable how much money that platform makes off of games that they didn't develop. They just host them for other people. And it would be ballsy of Google to make a gaming console that didn't run on any version or kernel of Android. Like, to combat Xbox and PlayStation, they would have to build new software. Android, like, at the minute, and especially mobile gaming hardware, simply can't support the kind of gameplay that an Xbox and a PlayStation do, and that's why you buy those consoles, because the cost of entry is a lot higher. The necessary, like, parts and software is a lot harder to run. So to make a console, Google would have to build new software or drastically change the software they already have, invest in hardware to a major extent, and then either invest in studios, content, or hope that the industry fits around them. And it just seems too much to ask.
yeah. I mean, I think the reason why I mentioned Google and Amazon being likely candidates for it, from my point of view, is that I think that we're getting to a stage in certain places where the internet is good enough that streaming can actually come back as a possibility. Um, like, one of the big reasons that PS Now never did that well on the PS4 is that it's, most places in America at least don't have good internet.
Hmm.
Even a lot of places in the UK don't have good internet. And I think, like, I'm still kind of tempted to get PS Now because I know that here in my internet it would be fine.
Hmm.
Um, I actually played On Live, which was a very old. Do you know about On Live? Very
I
long
know
time
On
ago, I
Live
played
very
Prince of
well.
Persia on Live, which is one of the first, like, streaming game services you had, and back then, yeah, it lagged. Um, so I think there's room, at least on the market, for a streaming only console, which I think could actually work. However, a good point to raise, I think, is that in some ways you mentioned exclusivity not mattering, but I still feel like even if I feel like the Sony have done very well out of exclusives this generation. I think it definitely has driven them, and I think it would still sell well against, and it would probably still outsell a streaming only console. Um, I don't know exactly about that.
So
I think
clarify.
even for Xbox, I think they could have the games that would drive, even if it was the multiplayer games that do well, it could drive their sales against something that's just there as playing different games on streaming, but then it could replace PC. So
I sort of kind of agree with you, kind of don't, because I think it's very unknown territory. Like the question I guess we have to ask is if PUBG and Fortnite launched today at the same price, so free, and both were crossplay, would Xbox benefit more from the sales of one or the other? If PUBG was still exclusive. Well, no, that doesn't work. But like, do you sort of know what I mean? Like, if PUBG goes crossplay, not exclusive tomorrow, then those sales for Xbox are out of the window. But it's failing as a result of it being limited to one platform and not having the same push that Fortnite does. Like, Crash is another example. If and another example is like Minecraft. Like, Xbox bought the rights to Minecraft, and the reason they didn't limit it to Xbox One is because they make more money giving it to everyone, and it does better as an IP giving it to everyone. But they're simultaneously they just bought 5 studios to make exclusive games. So that's what I mean about the industry being super volatile, because we don't know what a case for success is. Like, we don't know if the next Battle Royale will aim to sell themselves to one platform or sell themselves to every player everywhere. We don't know which makes more sense anymore, because one made a lot of sense and the other made a lot of sense, and they're still polar opposites. We don't know if story games do better as a good IP from a good competitor on all platforms or as an exclusive. And the question I put to you is, if out the gate, all the consoles in the next generation, so probably PS5 and Xbox 2, but let's say that Switch, Shadow announced a new console as well, if they all come out with perfect PR, if they don't fail out the gate like the Xbox One does, what does the industry look like? And I don't know that I can say yet.
Yeah, okay, no, that's a very good point. Yeah, that's a very good point. I do wonder for this, this isn't really exactly related, but it's related to that, but not like the topic. I do wonder whether Sony has such a market share that it'll go forwards that way, or whether they'll do something like Xbox did and kind of drive their PR back a little bit. You're right, though. When it comes to perfect PR, I think if it comes to perfect PR, then like Sony probably have a good chance of continuing some ball rolling. But I don't think that they're going to have perfect PR. So, because I think we're already seeing it kind of like have negative PR.
I think so. This is, as you say, this is kind of an aside. I think Sony are in a really tough position, because if you read between the lines, I think their network is pretty fucking balked. Like, people have been asking for like name changes and some other hardcore network stuff for a while, and nobody's been able to explain why it can't happen. But they have been able to say it super can't happen yet. Like, there is something built into that system that means you're changing your name fucks with everything. And we've seen Sony left, right, and centre be really resistant to crossplay and cross-network play. I wonder if the PlayStation Network is just balked enough that adding in these kind of features, like letting everyone play cross-play with Fortnite and this, that, the other, would be troublesome and would make them look inferior a little bit. So they're holding off in the hopes that Xbox continue to look inferior in like their exclusives and the range of people they have on them, but at the same time shooting themselves in the foot, because that little bit of balking is getting in the way of the 80 million people who have bought the console.
Yeah, yeah, it's definitely a good point. Um,
Man, this generation is fascinating.
yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see how we go into the next one. Um, I feel like um, Microsoft probably will have a bit of a drive next year. Not next year, next generation. Because I don't know, I do feel like there is a lot of negative press. We'll see how it goes.
I don't
There's
know.
a lot of positive press in fairness as well, actually, but
I think
um,
if Sony fuck up the PR next generation, then like it's with so many people buying their console and giving them their opinion. And they have been really good at listening to people. They've just not necessarily done the best at acting on that. And again, I think that might be because they're sort of backed into a corner to some extent. But to do the PR that badly, I think would be a giant failure on their part because of how good they've been at saying we like with crossplay recently they've said we know this is a problem, we're trying to fix it. And that at least means that they like have heard that it's a problem. Whereas PS3, when that launched, like they so badly didn't know that was a problem that they launched a console on the back of it. Like, go and watch that press conference from E3. It's a fucking nightmare. And that speaks of a tone deaf company, just like Xbox One's launch speaks of a tone deaf company, but I don't think either company at this point is tone deaf. I think they're good at listening to people. It's just how much can they act on it. Xbox has barely acted on the exclusive thing. Sony has barely acted on the network thing. So
yeah, totally. That's totally fair, and that's a good way. It's a good actual way of putting it. Really is. Xbox has the network, but not the games. Sony has the games, but not the network, if you like, or the exclusive games at least. Story games.
mm.
Yeah,
so
no, it's a good way of putting it.
so that being said, you made a very fair point where we were discussing this pre-show, and that was that this article was written by Jason Schreier, and Jason Schreier is very, very good at earmarking things that you should pay attention to. Like, he's very good at saying, hey, this is a thing that's going to happen in games fairly soon, you should pay attention to this. And I didn't expect him to predict a Google console. Anytime a new console has entered the ring, it tends to kill one of the competitors eventually, like PlayStation and Sony. To some extent, I mean, not all being told, but to some extent, Xbox and Nintendo. Nintendo came back from the dead, but like Xbox really pushed Nintendo to look at different innovation, and that innovation led to the Wii U, which nearly led to their demise. If Google release a console tomorrow and the industry goes as it always has, i.e., 4 consoles ends up killing one and returns to 3 consoles, who does this kill?
Um, hmm. So the question is, here's the thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
If Google releases a streaming-only console, can it play PC games? If it can play PC games, then it kills Microsoft.
Ooh, okay.
Um, in the sense that if it can play, if it can play if it can have if it has like a Windows Store integration to it or something, which I can't imagine they'd give it. But if they saw it as maybe not, well, it's like they at the moment in fact, in the moment they've been releasing some games on Steam
Mm.
that would be their own exclusives.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
And you have to wonder if they kept doing that with a streaming console, then it would give um, give this device the ability to play multiplayer games or whatever. I don't know. I guess I wouldn't see that happening, but that's something that I think is somewhere that it could have an advantage on, say, Microsoft, because at the moment, Microsoft's big thing is they have the most powerful console.
Mm-hmm.
And if they don't go into the next generation with games, then I do think that they would miss out to something that was just like a multi-plat but really HD or whatever. If we can offer like HD streaming, multi-plat, everything, then I think Microsoft would lose out. But Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say.
Yeah, hard to say is the perfect way to sum this up. I think the one thing it definitely doesn't kill is the Switch,
Mm.
unless it's a handheld. But like if it's a handheld, it's a phone, right? Like if it's a handheld, it's Pixel with some peripherals. It's not a console, probably. So I don't think it kills the Switch in any way. Uh, if PlayStation get their network stuff fixed or work towards it and show that they're working towards it, it could kill Xbox. Like it could really kill Xbox. It could very easily take the place of people's second console. But if Xbox get their exclusivity thing fixed and really double down on the crossplay stuff, like they work with Nintendo more closely, they offer more cross PC stuff. I don't want to say it could kill PlayStation because that seems dumb, right? Like they're such a behemoth at this point. To kill them would be David and Goliath. But like, if crossplay is the future, they need to get that shit fixed.
Yeah,
And if Google can come in and offer something that does it immediately, that could quickly become people's second console or first console in a place where Xbox is still cross-playing successfully.
yeah. I mean, I'm still in a place where I think I told you before about this. Is that I don't believe that. Um, I don't believe that the PS3. How to put this? So I think that the PS3 didn't sell to its it didn't sell well with its own market, if you like, or if you have like the people that could potentially buy a PlayStation console,
Mm-hmm.
it didn't sell well to that market, at least at the start, and it picked up a bit later on. Um, Whereas, say, Xbox 360 and Xbox One have basically done about as well as each other. At least they started off that way. Things are kind of diverting a little bit now. But like one of the big things is if you track the generations together, is they're not that different.
Mm.
It's just the last generation, I guess the way to put it is that I don't think that the market's changed that much. It's just that people who didn't want a PS3, if you like. So the way of looking at it is that PS2 and PS4 track, because it's such a complicated way of putting it. But the gist of it is that actually, I think like Sony have a massive market share difference over Xbox, and over Microsoft, and it's not that say they lost it during the PS3 era. It's more that like they didn't want to buy the PS3, if you like, for some I don't know for some reason.
See,
But
I don't know. I kind of disagree with you there a little bit because if you look at like the PS2
it's the Europe numbers that tend to separate them.
like PS2 to PS3, the difference was huge. PS2 was 120, 130 million selling console. PS3, I think, ended on late 80s, early 90s. Xbox sold like OG Xbox sold like 10, 20 million, I want to say, around there. And Xbox 360 sold like 80 million. Like it kept pace with PS3 for the majority of the generation. And there's a very, very good argument to be made that Last of Us was like the killing blow of that generation, but only by a couple of million. Like, I don't think the market has changed. I agree with you, but I do think it's drastically grown. I think the amount of people buying consoles and the price of consoles, like an Xbox, when was it? The PS3 launched at $599 at the time, and that was back when that was back in 2004 when like $100 was a lot, not a lot more money, but like it wasn't as achievable as it is now, despite currencies sort of getting fucked. Um, I don't know. I also think like there's a generation of people, a much wider generation of people who have grown up with games who now have that disposable income. Like me and you could both tomorrow say, okay, I think I want a new console, and probably buy one. And like that wasn't an option when we were young, but we were the people who these games are now being sold to. I do think the market has grown drastically. I just think it's a matter of which direction it's grown into. Like,
Yeah, and
because
I think I said to you before how I guess there's the Xbox One. God, this is so off topic now. The Xbox One. I think I mentioned to you a while ago about this, and it's fairly true. The Xbox One last year sold like if you take out Christmas, it sold like 2 million consoles.
Hmm.
Um, I believe it's like generally year on year, not year on year. Generally, at the moment, it's like 3-1 globally.
Yeah,
Um, it's not doing
it's
that well, and I think I remember telling you the reason why I saw this coming in some sense is that it has kind of market saturation in America and the UK, or at least it has kind of like the saturation it had before with the 360 in the UK now. And so I don't think it's gonna be able to do much better because to do better, it would have to break into Europe a bit more, um, or break into other regions a bit more, and that's something that the market's been very resistant to. Nintendo's been doing very well in that respect, um, but then again, they always did. And Sony has a big store in, say, Europe and less so in Japan now, but still in Japan more than Xbox. And so I think, like, if Xbox, and they are making inroads to this, I think, but if they really want to pull the numbers in for the next generation, they need to kind of work out why certain consoles or certain games do really well in Europe and work out a way of targeting that region. Um, and just paying for marketing, to be honest with you.
mm.
Like I've mentioned before, how like I think Sony's FIFA and Call of Duty marketing has probably whatever they've spent on that. Like that's probably like 20 million consoles at least.
Well, yeah, but the problem is that like one model doesn't apply to the other because yeah, Sony had FIFA and Call of Duty and that bought a lot of consoles for them. But like Xbox started that the generation with it, and Xbox also bought Tomb Raider for a year. Like Tomb Raider sells consoles now, but it didn't for them at the time. Like um what am I trying to say? I kind of disagree with you about the whole Europe thing because Xbox at the minute Xbox is 2-1 to PlayStation. So PlayStation sold like 80 million, Xbox One's on 38.2, I think, at last check, and that's like validated by somebody or whatever. But it's 3-1 in Europe, but 2-1 in America. Except for the majority of the generation last time, it was 1-1 in America.
I
Like
think
there's
it's still one, like it's close to 1-1 in America, I think.
it's 2-1 in America. I'm pretty sure.
Oh, okay.
Um, and I like, and even if it is 1-1, because like it can't be 1-1 in America because the market, there's no way the market's grown 3 times in Europe what it would have done in America.
I know, but there's still kind of. I think this is one of the reasons why I say that. This is one of the reasons why I say that Sony has a much bigger market share. What I was saying earlier
I mean,
is that
sorry, not to jump in there, but I do agree with you because of like Japan and potentially the inroads they have to China and the legacy they have and the way that pulls. I do think
yeah,
they have a
it's all
larger.
like places in Mexico, and like it's. I think Sony PS4 is a lot more global than Xbox in general.
Mm,
I think there's people buying PS4s in. Oh, I've put myself in a spot here. There's people buying PS4s in Russia if you're allowed to have PS4s in Russia. But like
in Soviet Russia, PS4 buys you.
yeah, but like I think PS4 is a lot more global than Sony's a lot more global than Xbox. I
Mm.
think Xbox does very well in English-speaking countries, but doesn't do very well outside of them. Um, that's kind of why I think they need to make inroads. I think, and they are trying to, and I think like they're
So, actually, now that you said that, so the only way I could see Google making a console, actually, now that you said it, doesn't feel quite as unviable as it once did, is they're really good in non-English speaking countries, especially places like China and India, where the mobile market is a lot cheaper, but the entry points into it are a lot more popular. Like you look at budget smartphones like the Motorola's and arguably like OnePlus and my kind of thing. They are so much more popular outside of English speaking countries. They're popular in English speaking countries, but they're so much more popular outside of it because that's like the high end Android of its day in those countries. And if Google can make a streaming console that costs peanuts because it's streaming, that actually makes a worrying amount of sense.
yeah, totally. I guess for the debate earlier about which console does it kill, I think it's It
Probably
sounds
does
from your
kill
argument.
Xbox.
What's that?
Probably does kill Xbox.
Oh, I don't know. Like, I think from your argument from earlier, it sounds like, well, for my argument, I guess, is that Xbox isn't very international. So, because it is very localized to English-speaking countries, it wouldn't affect them as much as it might affect, say, Sony and the Switch.
Oh, yeah, but I also don't know because if the gaming industry in those countries gets a massive rise from the idea of people playing games, like that's a market that Xbox simply won't cut itself into, whereas PlayStation and the Switch can. Like, oh god, this is really difficult now because if Xbox is able to crossplay with them, and you've got people in countries that basically didn't have access as easily to gaming hardware as before, network could be a really big thing. But also, Xbox doesn't sell to those countries very well, and if gaming becomes a bigger industry in those countries, it's harder to understand who'll come out the victor when they're not cutting themselves into the cake. This is fascinating.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, well, Mr. Jason Schreier, we will see if you're smarter than me and Lewis about the gaming industry. You probably are. You know far more about the gaming industry than either of us do. But we try our hardest, and we hope that you're enjoying listening to us. It was a bit of a wobbly outro, but give it to me. It was all right. Thanks very much for joining me, Lewis.
Yeah, thank you for joining me on my show.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for having me. What will you be playing this week?
More Binding of Isaac. I've also been playing Vampire.
Oh, nice. How is it?
Yeah, it's really good. If you're into kind of like lots of talking and interactions and character stories, everyone's got like a unique story going on, and you can save people or kill people, and that affects the entire world globally.
Can I put a thing to you?
No.
Do you know who Vampire is published by?
Isn't it by?
It's made by Don't Nod.
Yeah, I know it's made by Don't Nod, which still surprises me.
Is it published independently?
I think it is. Because I don't think it's something.
Can we make Vampire our indie game of the week? Because Don't Nod, I genuinely Don't Nod are one of my favourite studios in gaming at the minute, and I think more people should support them.
It's published by Focus.
They're independent.
Focus Heavy Directed. But they're still kind of moddy, indie.
Don't Nod are indie, and it's not published by a first party.
Yeah. Okay. All
right. So Vampire.
We'll let it work.
Vampire is our somewhat indie game of the week. You should go respect Don't Nod because they're an awesome studio.
Yeah, it's a very good game. I think, to be frank, its combat's nothing amazing, but if you really liked if you played Witcher or something and really like just kind of listening to stories and talking to people, it does that really well.
Cool. I'll be putting all my time into my favourite orange marsupial, and I'll probably be streaming him a bit, so come watch me swear at a screen, because I forgot how difficult that game is. Thanks very much for joining us. You can find us on all the social channels at Games Upcast. On all of them, we're on iTunes, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. Subscribe to this show if you don't want to miss anything. We publish at 6:30 p.m. on a Monday, and much earlier that day on iTunes, so you can catch us on your way to work. We will be back next week. Have a lovely week. Play some games. Thanks for joining us. Like the show. Thumbs up for everything. Plug. See you next week. Bye.